maybe you don't need more time to heal. Maybe you don't need more time to analyze and process what occurred, but rather you need new experiences that you've never seen and never experienced before to show your mind, to show your nervous system that there is a change occurring in your reality that is unprecedented and that could not be expected. I think we often forget that new experiences shape, challenge, and confront our sense of self and our sense of identity more than a lot of practices could. Have you ever experienced something so new, so different than anything you've ever experienced before that it actually changes you in a substantial way? And now I want you to think back to maybe one of those times where your routine was a little bit different. Maybe you were forced to be more out in the world than you normally would. Maybe you didn't spend as much time at home for whatever reason. And I want you to think about what that felt like. And a lot of times, even if it's something we didn't necessarily like, even if it's something we really didn't want to do, but we were sort of obligated to do it, maybe we had to wake up earlier than normal, we had to go through it. And then I want you to think about how it felt right when you were done with it, if it was a negative. So if it was a negative, I want you to think about how you felt on the way home when you were finally done and the relief. And more than the relief, I want you to actually think about how sort of empowered you felt. I think back to a summer job I had years ago, and every Friday when I would be done with the work for the week, I don't know why I said it like that, but I would ride home with such happiness. I would ride home with such confidence. And of course, that would reset on that Monday. But at the end of the summer, I remember being in such a flow, in such a sort of entranced state of being. Obviously, I didn't know it at the time, but I really do think it's because you're constantly expanding the bounds of your tolerance for discomfort to the point now where everything else feels like such a luxury. When you're doing something you really don't like, and when you're finally out of it, every normal thing you do on a normal day-to-day basis feels like such a privilege to do it. It feels so easy. It feels so light. It feels almost comical to even stress about any little thing because you just got done doing something much more difficult. And I do think that if we want to change our perception of who we are, if we want to, in a real way, change our reality and show our nervous system new experiences, it doesn't actually have to be through constantly chasing discomfort. It doesn't have to be taking the first flight to a different country and staying in a hostel with a rug and a pillow on the floor. It doesn't need to be that. It could be that. It doesn't need to be that. I think actually all we really need to do is see new environments, new people, and new experiences, right? There's an interesting example that happens in neuroplasticity case studies and whatever else. That is, when you brush your teeth with the opposite hand that you normally do, and then you practice these certain affirmations, and maybe you think and do your visualization techniques while brushing your teeth with your opposite hand, it tends to rewire the mind much quicker. And it forces the mind to open new neural pathways because it's doing something it never has before. So it's automatically open for change. And then we're sort of inputting the kind of beliefs and affirmations that we want. So this is the case with anything. When you're experiencing something new, that's why people always say that in the midst of the storm, in the midst of adversity, whatever it may be, that's when it's most important to assure and assume the self that you want and to be the person that you always wanted to become. Embody that version of yourself, because when new experiences are coming about, the mind is actually open to the most radical change, because the mind is using extra energy. It's using itself in ways that it never has before to deal with the unknown, to deal with these new unfamiliar environments and circumstances. So in these unfamiliar environments and circumstances, if we remain in the version of ourselves that we're looking to become, it'll happen much quicker. So there's two very distinct things happening here. Number one, we're growing our tolerance for being outside in the outside world. I think that's really understated, and it's sort of like a touchy topic that people don't want to talk about because it hits too close to home and it's too specific. But I really do think that leaving our house, being in the outside world a lot, involving And being a little bit busy is not the worst thing in the world. And actually, it expands our tolerance for discomfort. It expands our tolerance for the unknown, because when you're outside in the world, not everything is in your control. Actually, 99% of things are not in your control. The only thing that is in your control is the way you react to the world around you. When you're staying home all the time, everything becomes very predictable. So you're trying to enforce this change. You're trying to create this new version of yourself. But in that same breath, you're not really giving the brain any opportunity to understand that change. The brain doesn't see change when your routine is exactly the same, when you're doing the same thing every day, the same comfortable activities every single day. The brain doesn't see change. But when you're constantly engaging in new environments, new connections, new situations, it opens the brain up to this change. Because while the brain is trying to configure and figure out a way to help you the best in dealing with this unknown circumstance, it's also the most open to change. So in implementing that version of ourselves, when we are in these new situations, new environments, it makes the brain adapt to that version of ourselves much, much quicker. So those are the two things that are happening. You're expanding your tolerance for discomfort. You're expanding your tolerance for anxious and fearful situations, because the outside world is unpredictable, it's unknown. And also, you're opening the brain to change, because when the brain is, for example, when the brain sees a new math equation, it has to open and sort of involve a part of itself that it never really has. Not like it's grabbing some new thing out of your mind. No, not that. It just needs to operate and process in a different way, because it's never done this before. It's never solved this equation before. And to solve this equation, it will adapt and maneuver itself through neural pathways to, and sorry, I should say reorganize in a way to solve this equation. So that leaves an opening. That leaves an opening to really staple and ground change at a fundamental level. So how do we do this every day? Maybe not every day. Maybe every day is a bit extreme at first, but you have to, and if you want, you can even write this on a whiteboard or a notebook, whatever it may be. You have to write down or think about two different realities, right? I want you to think about the one where you are the most confident, most charismatic, most present, most empowered, and most living in the flow. I want you to think about that reality. And then vice versa, I want you to think about the reality that is more similar maybe to the one that you've been living, where you're giving a little bit of energy to anxiety. You're kind of cowering away from the fears that exist in your mind. You're letting those negative thoughts sort of convince you into making certain decisions and choices. So now you've got two realities here. You've got two different versions of yourself. And when you are free, when you have the time to be free, I want you to really objectively try to remove yourself from the situation and think about the two different ways in which these two people are going to make do of their time, right? So whether a plan comes up and you have a choice to either, go and hang out with friends or go see family, whatever it may be, and one version of yourself is telling you to go, the other is not, whatever that may be, that makes it a little bit easier because we can compare the two perspectives in real time on a certain decision. And if that's the case, really quick, if that's the case, then you have to ask yourself, if fear and anxiety weren't a factor, if I knew everything would be pretty chill in going to this thing and doing this thing, if I knew it wouldn't go too wrong, what would my decision be? What would my choice be? And what you're going to find a lot of the time, if you're being honest with yourself, is that, this is what I would do. If I can have a guarantee from the universe that my fears and anxieties won't come true and that it won't go really bad, this is what I would do. And that's exactly what the version of yourself that you're looking to become would do. That's exactly what they would do, because you're looking to become a version of yourself that is not deterred, that is not plagued by fear and anxiety. So that version of yourself doesn't listen to fear and anxiety when making decisions. This is how you show your nervous system a new reality, by engaging in experiences for the sole reason of wanting. You don't make decisions and you don't experience the situations and circumstances of life because of fear, because of anxiety, because of worry. Those aren't the driving force behind your decisions. Think about the toll that takes on your body. We are talking about your nervous system here, but think about the toll that takes on your body when every decision is made in fear. What does this tell your body? It's telling you to live in fight or flight. It's telling you to live in survival mode. That's what it's telling you to do. And through the lack of new experiences, we are prioritizing safety over expansion. We are prioritizing fear and quote unquote survival over actually living life. We have to understand that there is no safety net in life. And I don't mean that from a brutal nihilistic standpoint. I mean that from the point that the only safety net we truly have in life is our very tolerance for experiencing life. The safety net is within ourselves. There's no outside safety net. If you cling to an outer safety net in life, you're going to be isolated and clinging to your room and your home constantly, because that's the closest thing you'll get to a safety net. But even those things aren't safe from fear and anxiety if you abuse that comfort zone. So the only real safety net we have is a tolerance for discomfort. It's a tolerance for anxiety. That's the real sort of freedom that we can build. Is the peace of mind we're looking for is actually earned through a process of desensitization to the experiences of life. If you're out of your house all the time, you're going to be forced to engage with new people, new experiences, new situations. And this is going to prep your nervous system. It's going to sort of build calluses on your mind and your nervous system within experiencing reality in a certain way. And that is just the way it is. It's experiencing life. It's free flowing. And even if you get caught in the emotional tides of it all, at least you're experiencing what it means to live. Rather than when we're letting fear and anxiety choose for us, we're trying to forego all of the discomfort that is sort of embedded in life. And that's a brutal truth that I had to accept, and I think we all have to accept eventually. And that is that life inherently, built into it, has discomfort. There will be unpleasant times for everyone, regardless of what we do. So now, are we going to spend all of our life trying to avoid these unpleasant times, these discomforts? Or are we going to spend the 90, probably 7% of our lives that are relatively neutral and that are maybe even kind of good? Are we going to spend all of that time trying to prep and avoid unpleasant circumstances and discomfort? Or are we going to use that time to actually live and enjoy our life? And we'll realize that by making that decision and using that time to live and enjoy our life, we are showing our nervous system a new reality. New experiences show your nervous system a new reality because now your choices are being fostered from a different emotional perspective. The emotions you're making decisions in are going to be the emotions your body carries, stores, and nurtures. So when you're constantly prioritizing fear, when you're constantly prioritizing anxiety and worry, your body is learning to prioritize these emotions as the driving factor literally in your existence. This is the survival state of being, and it's what we needed way back in the day, because existing in fear a long, long time ago when we were living in the wild helped us, because we didn't want to find out what was growling in that bush. We didn't want to hear a noise in the forest and say to ourselves, oh, it's just an imaginary danger. No, back then, and how most animals live, is in a sort of perpetual state of fear. It's not a reflective state of fear, but it's a fight or flight, and they're always ready to, run full speed away from some sort of danger at any minute. But now, things have changed. And I actually think that this is the psychological evolution of any species. And that is learning to exit fight or flight, learning to exit survival mode in exchange for a higher state of being. And that higher state of being is going to be a rewiring and a reprogramming of our nervous system, where we bring awareness and bring consciousness to the fact that we can influence the way we're living our life. We can influence the way we're experiencing our life by simply regulating our emotions, right? And that's something that everyone needs. And if everyone had regulated emotions, we'd obviously be living in a very different world. We'd be living in a very different reality that we all share right now. But that's not the case. And eventually it might be. So right now we have to do our part, and we have to learn to enjoy our life. We have to learn to create satisfaction in our life. And this exists from a multitude of standpoints. So if it's something you desire, if it's something you want, and the thing holding you back from going and getting that thing is fear, is anxiety, then it's imperative that you don't listen to fear and anxiety and instead listen to the wanting in your heart to go experience something. Because it all ties together, right? You have a wanting, you have a desire for something greater, whether that be a career, whether that be a passion, whether that be a relationship, whatever it may be, you have this wanting for something deeper, for something more fulfilling. And the call to experience that is not just coming from somewhere outside of you, but it's actually coming from somewhere deep within you. And I would actually say maybe even your nervous system, because your nervous system is craving that new experience. Your nervous system is craving a new reality because the one right now is unsatisfactory and the one right now is actually causing more damage than good. And we don't have to make this extremely complicated, right? We don't have to rush into feeling like an angel. We don't have to rush into feeling like we're existing in the highest state of being we ever could. But slowly, we can prioritize the wanting, the purpose, and the excitement over the fear and anxiety. And every time there is a decision to be made, obviously within logic, within bounds, we choose excitement, we choose passion, we choose what would be fun instead of what scares us. Sorry, not instead of what scares us. We choose what would be fun because it's fun, even though it scares us. Does that make sense? And it's important that we don't, constantly seek to exist in this specific state of being where we're always trying to chase this perfect alignment, this perfect emotional regulation. It's probably going to happen in a different way than you would imagine. Your life might look very different, and your life might look very different than you could have ever imagined, and it's going to be a life where you don't want anything else. You're completely satisfied. You're completely fulfilled with it. But it looks very different than the one you would have imagined for yourself now or years ago or whatever it might have been. And the same thing goes for a regulated nervous system. The same thing goes for feeling good within ourselves and enjoying our life, is that I don't think we should set specific expectations of what that may look like, but rather embrace whatever path unfolds in front of us as a result of making decisions in excitement and passion and whatever positive emotions we're looking to harbor and make decisions from. So maybe, to wrap this up, maybe the answer isn't more alone time. Maybe the answer isn't more psychoanalysis. Maybe the very simple, rudimentary answer is going and living your life with more presence, with more radical excitement for the experience of life than you ever had before. Maybe we need more of what we did as kids. Maybe we need to connect with life in a deeper way than we have before. Maybe there is the space, there is the capacity within yourself to create a different experience from within. And maybe that experience from within is going to take a new reality. And something really important I want to say before I finish here is that don't wait for it to happen. Nothing's going to happen on its own. That is almost a guarantee. You have to go out of your way. You have to go and inconvenience yourself to experiencing these different things. So you have to put on your shoes and actually leave your house, make plans, go and do something. Be the type of person that makes plans and doesn't just always wait for things to happen for them. That's the key. You have to be the type of person that makes things happen. When you make things happen, then the fate of your life is in your control because you're the one always making plans. You're the one always making decisions. If you just let the cards fall in front of you, if you just let the dice roll, then you're going to be completely at the hands of whatever unconscious unfolding is going to happen. I don't know what will happen if you just let the dice roll, if you just let the cards sort of play out. I have no idea, but I know what will happen if you take matters into your own hands. It can only be a positive benefit because whatever it is you are seeking, with enough attempt, with enough pursuit, with enough regulation, with enough tolerance, with enough facing discomfort, all these things, with enough of all of that, with enough effort, you will see a serious positive shift in your life. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link to my book down below if you guys want to read it and check it out. Other than that, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe as always. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you for listening, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.